Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm really excited for today's video. It is going to be a new monthly series that I'm going to be trying out here on my channel. I hope I end up liking it, or I hope it ends up working. But as you guys know, if you were subscribed to my channel last year, I wanted to make palette themed content a larger part of my channel, but then I ended up just like purchasing a lot of palettes and not necessarily doing any more palette themed content really. So I've been like kind of sitting here with my makeup collection, kind of thinking about types of palette content I want to create. And I know that I really want to be better this year about cycling through my palette collection. So I thought it would be fun at the beginning of each month to choose like 10 to 12 palettes throughout my makeup collection that kind of remind me of the month that we're entering. So obviously we're entering February, which makes me think of like pinks and purples and like mauve tones and Valentine's Day. So I selected 12 palettes from my makeup collection that I want to focus on this month, and honestly just use the palette at least one time, and then I will come back next month, share with you potentially like some looks that I created with the palettes that I pulled out, share with you how many times I used each palette, and just things like that as a kind of better way just to pull more palettes out, kind of cycle through my palette collection, etc. As always, if you guys have any ideas for this series that you would like to see me add for my next updates, please do let me know. Again, I really, fingers crossed, hope that I end up liking this. I was like going back and forth on whether or not I wanted to even film this, and I was like, well, let's just give it a try and see how it goes. Today I'm obviously wearing more like periwinkle and purple on my eyes. I'm not very festive for February, but I do have 12 palettes to share with you guys today that are very pink themed for the month of February. So if you guys are interested in seeing which palettes I want to focus on for my February palette stash, stay tuned. First, if you have yet to subscribe to my channel and you like project panning content, palette themed content, or just chit chatting about makeup, I would love for you to consider subscribing before moving on. And other than that, let's jump into the video. Before we get into the palettes, I'm going to quickly jump back in. I finished filming this video and I forgot that I also wanted to do a build your own palette for each month. So I will also be including a build your own palette in this video and the rest of the monthly series as well. So stay tuned at the end of the video to see the shades that I selected in my build your own palette for the month of February. Again, kind of a way to just cycle through my single shadow collection and try and give myself a little bit of extra motivation to also focus on some of my eyeshadow singles, because that is an area in my makeup collection that I feel like very easily gets neglected. So stay tuned for that. So this first introduction video to the series might not be the longest video ever, because I'm obviously just sharing with you the 12 palettes that I pulled out. But then for my next update, we will go through all of the 12 palettes that I was focused on for this month, and then I will show or share with you guys the palettes that I picked out for the month of March. If you guys also have any palette ideas or palettes you would like to see me pull out for specific months, leave me comments down below and I'll make sure I jot those down and try and pull the palettes out that you guys want to see me focus on as well. But let's start with this palette right here. This seemed like a very obvious choice for the month of February. This is the Natasha Denona Love palette, and I can't remember, I know the Mini Love, which I'm also gonna share. The Mini Love came out for kind of like Valentine's Day. I think it was last year. I can't remember if this came out for Valentine's Day or around Valentine's Day when this palette came out, but this is obviously the Love palette, and this seemed very fitting for the month of February. I really did not reach for this palette a whole ton last year, and I'm kind of bummed about that. So I want to pull this out and hopefully reach for this one a few times, maybe create a full look with this palette rather than just reaching into it for a shade or two. Sometimes I just reach into a palette for like one shade, but don't actually create full looks out of palettes. I want to try and challenge myself to create a full look out of this palette. I think I'll try and include it in my series as well, like potentially favorite looks that I created from the palettes that I selected. But speaking of the Mini Love palette, I'm also pulling out the Mini Love. It seemed very fitting, and I thought that this would be a good sister palette to the actual Love palette. I can't remember, I don't think there's repeat shades among the two, like not like actual repeats, there could be like dupes between the two, but I also really enjoy the Mini Love. I actually really enjoyed this palette last year, and I feel like if I continue to focus on this shade right here as an inner corner highlight, I could potentially hit pan on that maybe in February. Otherwise, if I just keep pushing for sure by March, there's a pretty good sized dip in this, and I feel like I have a good amount of pans throughout my mini Natasha Denona palette collection, so it would be nice to hit another pan. And then speaking of Natasha Denona minis, I'm also going to be pulling out my mini retro palette. I feel like this palette could be very fitting for both February and March, because I feel like I could get away with like these two shades right here for like March. So maybe I'll roll this over for a March palette as well. But it's been a little bit since I've reached for my retro palette, and I thought that the pretty mauves and this like really fun pop of like pink with like almost like an astral pink, I thought this would be really fun to pull out for February. One of my favorite looks that I've ever done with this palette, I just popped this all over the lid and then did like a winged eyeliner, and I loved that look and have been wanting to recreate that look ever since, but just have not gotten around to it. So I'm really excited to pull out my mini retro. Fun fact, I did just recently order the mini crush, so I will hopefully get some use out of that as well in February. I also grabbed my Abh Norvina palette. This palette to me just kind of screams Valentine's Day as well, with the like softer pinks and purples, but then obviously I could play around with some of these more like sultry neutrals as well. And this is a palette that has only two eyeshadow pans in it right now, but I feel like I'm close to hitting pan on some other shades as well. This is a palette I was considering including in my palettes on my last two Raw series, but didn't. So we'll see how this goes for this month, see what looks I create, see how I'm feeling about this palette. And then, I don't know, I feel like this palette is always in my mind, like on a chopping block, like as a potential to declutter, but then I just end up reaching for the palette and falling in love with it again. So we'll see how that goes this month. I have 3 quads that I have decided to pull out. The first one is from Pat McGrath. This is the Divine Rose Luxe Quad in Eternal Eden. I want to say this palette came out around Valentine's Day last year, and I will be honest with you, this is probably my least favorite Pat McGrath quad in my entire collection. I just wasn't super impressed with it, and it just like wasn't all that special in my opinion. But I also feel like I could get some good use out of this in the month of February, and then kind of maybe decide whether or not this is a keeper in my collection or something that I could see myself decluttering. I do love, like I honestly love this matte shade, but I feel like I could dupe it in my collection, and I think this shade is beautiful as well. I mean, this shade is pretty, but it's just nothing special, and then I really don't reach for pink shades like this all that often. But this is February, and maybe my goal will be to create like 3 total like pink looks. We'll get into like a really pink palette that I'm going to be including, so maybe I just did my goal, like my goals for February this month, or this morning. Maybe I'll add that. Maybe I'll add that 3 pink looks this month. I think I'm gonna add that to my goals. I also grabbed this ColourPop quad. This is in the shade Peace, Love, and Libra. And this is just a really cute, mostly pink themed quad that I thought would be fun for kind of February Valentine's Day. I feel like I keep repeating that, but I've reached for this a couple of times in its lifetime, but not a bunch, so thought I would pull that one out. And then I'm also grabbing my Roen 1111 quad. I love this quad, but I feel like I do not reach for it enough, and I thought that this really beautiful, again, kind of like light metallic pinky silver astral sort of shade could be super beautiful. And then I feel like this would honestly pair super well with the Natasha Denona retro palette, the mini retro. I don't know, I'm just excited to reach for this. It's been a little bit, and for some reason this was screaming February to me. Speaking of the very pink palette that I pulled, I did decide to grab my Juvia's Place The Sweet Pinks. I maybe reached for this a few times last year, reviewed it, and then put it away. And I don't create especially hot pink looks all that often, so I felt like this was the very fitting month to pull this out in, and maybe I'll create a full look with just these 6 shades too. You never know. This palette is going in my Pan Those Eyeshadow series, but I also wanted to focus on this for the month of February. It is another Pat McGrath palette. This is the Rose Decadence palette, and this seems pretty Valentine's Day-ish to me. I feel like, yeah, for the most part it's very like pinky purple. This is the shade that I'm currently working on in my Pan Those Eyeshadows, and it's this really beautiful like fiery reddy sort of metallic shade. It's very, very beautiful, and I'm hoping to create a couple of looks within all of the shadows in this palette, and again, it just screamed February to me. All right, and then the final 3 palettes. I have the Lawless Baby One palette, which is a really beautiful mauve tone palette. I love this pink shade. Again, I was kind of hunting through my palette collection for the most beautiful like metallic pink shades that I wanted to focus on. I feel like if I really focused heavily on this, I could potentially hit pan on this, maybe not in February, but within a few months. And then I really loved this palette when it first released, especially like these two shades right here with this popped on top. So I felt like this would be a fun one to pull out for February and just to kind of play around with again, because it's been a while since I've reached for that. I also grabbed the M Cosmetics Divine Skies eyeshadow palette. I've worn this a couple of times since I purchased it, but I really haven't like dove deeply into this palette. And again, it has some really beautiful like pinky mauve tones, a really beautiful pink shimmer, kind of a mid-tone pink shimmer, and just a palette that I feel like could honestly work for every day, but would be really good for the month of February to focus on as well. And then the final palette is going to be the Huda Beauty Nude Medium palette. This is a very pinky palette. I obviously have an eyeshadow, like a huge eyeshadow pan up here, and it would be fun to hit another eyeshadow pan. I feel like I have some good disturbance in a couple of the like more metallic shades throughout this palette, and the pan sizes in this are really not all that deep. So I feel like with a little bit of effort, I could potentially hit pan on a shade in here as well. So those are going to be all of the palettes that I will be focused on. Now let's jump into my February Build Your Own palette. All right, guys, jumping into my Build Your Own palette, I'm also always just gonna do like a smaller, like I'll always do my Build Your Own palette just in this little Tarte magnetic palette. I love the camo print anything, I'm all there for it. So I have 9 shades that I have selected, and I will pop swatches over here. I took a picture where I swatched each of the shades, and I will quickly go through each shade with you guys in order that they are swatched. So up first I have JD Glow Opal, which is this really beautiful sort of like astral pink to blue sort of shade. It's really pretty. You can use it as a lid topper and just like lightly tap it out, or you can build it up to be a more intense foiled metallic, and I just think it's beautiful. Then I have Terra Cosmetics Andromeda. I don't know exactly how to pronounce that. It's this really beautiful pink shade. Some of the Terra Cosmetics shades are very, very crumbly, if you will, but again, they're super intense metallic, just beautiful shades. And then the third shade is actually another Terra Cosmetics shade. This is in the shade Atlas, and it's a really beautiful astral, like silvery blue sort of shade. Maybe not necessarily a very February sort of shade, but I also live in Minnesota, and it's always super cold throughout the month of February as well, so it kind of just gave me like cold vibes, and I love to do like an astral blue sort of shade. I hope I'm using that word correctly. Astral blue sort of shade all over my lid. These two shades right here are out of the ColourPop. I can see the palette in my head. It was in collaboration, I think, with I Love Sarah E. They're just 2 singles from that palette. And then these 2 shades are singles that I got, I think it's like Point Perks from Sephora, and they're Aether Beauty shades. Neither of them have, what am I trying to say? Neither of them have shade names either. This shade right here is also doesn't have a shade name. This I think I popped out of a Pure Cosmetics palette a couple of years ago, and then this green shade, the last shade swatched, is out of the Alamar Cosmetics palette, and I forget, is this called like El Maquion? Something like that. And I know that this probably would be more fitting to like St. Patrick's Day and potentially March, so it could be a shade that I maybe roll over for that as well. But it's been a little bit since I have created a green eyeshadow look, and I was just, I don't know, I had the itch, and I didn't want my whole palette to be like pinks. I wanted to create a little bit of variety, especially because I pulled so many pinks out throughout my palette collection, so I thought it'd be fun to toss a green in, maybe do like a pink and green look. We'll see, but these are the 9 eyeshadow singles that I will be focused on throughout the course of the month of February as well, and I will come back and share like how many times I use each shade with you next month. And I'm really excited about the Build Your Own palette section of this as well. Again, if there's any like changes or any updates you want to see to this series, I would love your guys' feedback down below. This is just like a small idea I had in my head. I hope that this works well. I hope that I'm able to rotate through all the palettes that I included. Maybe I'll include less next month, especially because there'll be a lot of ground to cover in the next update. But that is going to wrap it up for today's video. I hope that you guys enjoyed. Thank you so much for sticking around to watch and for supporting my channel as you guys always do. I love you guys so much, and I will catch you in my next video. Bye.